Blog Talk Radio.
Mi chiamo Afura Kanu Afurai Kaitnut, Eneye EGUA Medinde Odwirafo Kwesi Nehem Ptah Akhan, Akwamuman Amaruka Atifi Mu Odwiraman Mu. That means greetings to all Afura Kani Afurai Kaiti people, meaning Africans, black people. Today is EGUA Marketplace Day. My name is Odwirafo Kwesi Nehem Ptah Akhan, Odwirafo of the Akwamu nation in North America within Odwiraman, the purified nation, Afurakani, Afuraikaitni people in the Western Hemisphere. Yet I say we thank you once again for tuning in to the broadcast. We're going to place some links in the chat room. If you have a question or a comment during the broadcast and you're on the phone line, simply hit the number 1 so that we can see that your hand is raised. If you are in the chat room, you log into the chat room, you must log in as a user in order to interact in the chat room. If you do not have a username, you can create one quickly in Blog Talk so that you can interact in Blog Talk. So we're going to put some links in the chat room for the individuals who are new to the broadcast. As we put this information, these links here, we have 3 broadcasts on a weekly basis. On Joda, Monday nights, we have Akan Ancestral, ancient, authentic Akan ancestral religion, where we deal specifically with the Akan expression of ancestral religion. Number 1, because we are Akan. Number 2, because of the misinformation that is propagated by individuals in the Western Hemisphere, as well as from the continent who are Akan, but who have been infected by white culture, whether it's Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, pseudo-white spirituality, white culture in general, that has infected their presentation of the culture. So therefore, when they speak about Akan culture, cosmology, ancestral religion, ritual practice, and so forth, there's an infection that manifests through that presentation. So we clarify concepts, clarify cosmology, clarify language and ritual practices, and deal specifically with our authentic expression of Akan ancestral religion, born of our blood circles, wherever we migrated into the world or were forced to migrate into the world. So therefore, we deal with our ancient Akana or Kanat, Nubian Kanat is the title of ancient Nubia, and the people, the Kanat people or Kanit people. Akana people migrated from ancient Kanat or Nubia to the western part of the continent, reestablishing Kanat or Ghana 2,000 plus years ago. Then 1,000 years after that, some of our people migrating from that region towards today's Ghana and Ivory Coast. In those regions, reestablishing Akana or Akan civilization in those regions. And then a few hundred years later, some of our people being taken from those regions and forced into North Central South America, the Caribbean, and Europe during the Musuo Ketie, the great perversity, the enslavement era. And this, of course, is how Akan people end up in the Western Hemisphere. But we carry our ancestral religious practices with us. We carry our language with us. We carry our ancestral religion in the blood circle, connected directly to our direct blood ancestresses and ancestors who still communicate directly with us. And the Abosom that are connected to our blood circles who were assigned to us pre-incarnation by Nyamewa, Nyame, the great mother, and the great father, the supreme being. So we are not given an ancestral religion. We are born into that by nature of our birthright, by nature of reincarnating through specific blood circles assigned to divinities and ancestral spirits by the supreme being. So our tradition, our ancestral religion is inborn, innate, and intrinsic, no matter where we have migrated or were forced to migrate into the world. And of course, we have our book, Hoodoo People, Afura Kanu, Afurai Kainu, the North America, Africans in North America, Akan, custodians of Hoodoo from ancient Hoodoo, Ndunu land, Kanit, Nubia, where we go into detail about that information. And of course, we just had our Hoodoo Nation Festival this past weekend, our first annual Hoodoo Mind. It was a great festival great success. Everybody has been giving positive feedback ever since. We had a number of vendors there. We had presentations. Of course, the event itself was an all-day event, free to the Aakhuamuman community, of course, and we published our Hoodoo Nation Festival Journal. That journal, we gave a free soft cover version of that book to everyone who came to the event, but the ebook version is also published, and we have the ebook version on our Hoodoo Mind page, and you can download the ebook version for free. And of course, you can also order the soft cover version. We have that available as well on our publications page, and we're putting the link in the chat room for both of those, for the Hoodoo Mind page as well as the publications page. So that's what we do on Joda Monday night. Tuesday night, Benada, Abenada, we deal with Ojira. Ojira means purification. Ojira also means the celebration of purification in the Akhan language, in the language of ancient Kanat and Kemet. Jira means purification. That also means the celebration of purification. So we deal with the purification of our culture, cosmology, ritual practices, ancestral wisdom, the nature of our governmental structures, and everything about our culture we deal with from a purified perspective. We talk about Ojira, purification, operationalizes Nanason. Purification operationalizes Afuraikani, or African ancestral religion. Ancestral religion is the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance. So through ritual, we incorporate those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to incorporate in order to harmonize our thoughts, intentions, and actions with divine order. And through ritual, we reject those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to reject, we need to repel, to hate, to repulse, in order to restore balance to our thoughts, intentions, and actions. Therefore, we can realign ourselves with divine order. So the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance. Constantly incorporating law and restoring balance, expansion and contraction, the expansive and contractive poles of ancestral religion. That's what Afuraikani ancestral religion is. African ancestral religion, no matter what form it takes, whether it's Akhan or Yoruba, Basa or Fula, Ebe or Fon, Bakongo, whether it's Hoodoo in North America, Juju in North America, Vodou in North America, Grigri in North America, wherever we exist in the world, we are aligning with the Great Mother and Great Father, the Supreme Being, through the agency of the Deity, the Abosom, and the spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors of our direct blood circle, spirit-genetic blood circle, the Nehem, Nsamanfo, and we ritually incorporate law and ritually restore balance to every thought, intention, and action, every moment, every day. This is how we operate as Afuraikani people. So we bring purification of clarification, purification to these concepts, to these ritual practices and so forth, so we can get back in alignment with reality. Ojira purification operationalizes our process of ritually incorporating divine law and ritually restoring divine balance. So this is what the nature of that show is on Tuesday night. And of course, on Awukudae Wednesday, we have EGUA Marketplace Day. We have individuals who come onto the show to showcase their businesses, organizations, and institutions that are serving the Afuraikani community in a positive capacity, and also maintaining and conveying our ancestral religious values at the same time. So we've had a number of individuals come onto the show. We'll put a link to our Okom economic development model, because part of that process dealing with the EGUA Marketplace show is we published the Okom economic development model, an economic development model rooted in our ancestral religious values. Therefore, it is a holistic approach to economic development rooted in our real culture. So we published that model. When you go to the Okom economic development model page, you can download the model. You can download the 4-part series we did on the model on Blog Talk, as well as 2 other videos. You will also see a list of the businesses, organizations, and institutions that have been part of the Okom Economic Development Model process, because part of that process is to starve the beast and feed the pride. That means we make an assessment on a weekly basis to determine what funds we would have wasted with the whites and their offspring, and then we starve the beast and feed the pride. We take those funds away from the white businesses, organizations, and institutions and reallocate those funds to the business, organization, or institution of the week. We are targeting one Afuraikani, African Black business, organization, or institution per week for 52 weeks for optimal capital infusion. That means as a community, when we starve the beast and feed the pride and we direct those funds, reallocate them to the business of the week, if you reallocate $10 you would have wasted at a white business like CVS or Walmart and reallocate that, starve that white beast and feed the pride, then you're infusing $10 of capital into the black business of the week. When 1,000 of our people do that in the same week, then that's a $10,000 infusion of capital away from white businesses who are serving their own interests, taking our money and empowering themselves, enriching themselves, putting their children through school, and so forth. Instead of assisting them, we starve the beast and feed the pride. We reallocate that $10,000 plus to the black business so they can stay open, expand their services, expand their products for us, hire our own people so that they can have permanent employment and towards entrepreneurship within our community. If we do not engage that process, we are leaving that 10,000 with our absolute enemies, the whites and their offspring. We are financing our own oppression. So we engage this process. So you look on the Okom Economic Development Model page, you'll see the list of businesses, organizations, institutions, their websites, as well as their interviews, the link to their interview where they sat with us for 2 hours on the show, talk about their business and how their ancestral religious values inform their service to the community. And of course, from last week to this week, and even previous, because it was a special period leading up to the Hoodoo Nation Festival, the business of the week was Hoodoo Mind, the Hoodoo Nation Festival, but that included all the various vendors that came out and participated in the festival and took out ads in the journal and so forth. So when you look in the Hoodoo Mind journal, you'll see the various vendors as well as some more businesses who didn't vend but wanted to support the work. With the various vendors that came out, you see their ads in the journal, their websites and so forth. So all of them, this was a special occasion over the past few weeks. All of these vendors together make up the businesses of the week for Okom Economic Development for these past 3 weeks, including this week. And then we'll get back to one per week next week. So, and a quick update, and we're going to get into some more of this a little bit later. We talked about in the previous broadcast, we were tentatively scheduling an event, a Kokobo event for November 14th. That event will actually take place on November 15th in Washington, D.C. So we are putting that together right now. The Kokobo event is the Kokobo movement. Kokobo means warning in tree in the Akhan language. It is also the name of our book, where we prove conclusively through translating properly various texts from Kemet, proving that dissexuality, homosexuality was never accepted in ancient Kemet and in Afuraikani ancestral culture in general. So part of the process with regard to this workshop, it's a free workshop, of course. All of our workshops are free. All of our presentations are free. All of our events are free to the Afuraikani community. We'll be doing the presentation, dissecting that information, but we also will go into the information that we released on our Kokobo movement broadcast, talking about eradicating dissexuality, homosexuality from the Afuraikani African Black community through ancestral religion. We have the capacity to overcome these obstacles. Many people have engaged that process, repelled these perverse, discarnate, ancestral and non-ancestral spirits, those ancestral spirits who were child molesters and so forth, criminals, make their transition. They're wayward, criminal-type spirits who are not able to dwell with the rest of the ancestresses and ancestors in a normal, peaceful capacity. So therefore, they become earthbound, hanging around the place where they died, projecting negative energy and perverse influences on the living. And those who are not receptive, they feel perverse urges, and they assume that these urges are their own, which they are not. And when we engage the ancestral religious ritual process, easily repel these negative entities and their overtures, and those perverse desires are neutralized immediately and perpetually. So, of course, just like any other perverse illness, all things can be addressed through our ancestral religious practice. So we have the capacity to eradicate this sexuality, homosexuality through ancestral religion from our community. Many people have done that already and will continue to engage that process. We're going to go into detail about that, as well as going into detail proving that these texts, for example, the Contendings of Heru and Set, the text dealing with the instructions of Ptah, the Ni-An-Kanum and Kanum-Hetep, the twins, the whites and offspring try to say were the first gay couple in ancient times, but of course these were identical twins. The divine prohibition against bisexuality, homosexuality in ancient Kemet, in the Heru, the so-called Book of the Dead, Book of Coming Forth by Day, showing that actual divine prohibition against the perverse, sexually deviant behavior. So all of that is in the book. So people have that foundation, and we go into detail about that, and then we engage the process talking about eradication of this sexually deviant behavior. And of course, the politics behind the whites and their offspring constantly promoting that perversity because that is their nature, and they would like to destroy our people, destroy our families, and that is a method by which they would like to do so. So of course, we can overcome all of that, and we're going to get into all of that. Part of the process with this Kokobo movement is not only having the free workshops, but also publishing, which we have already done. We have the ebook version of the book, Kokobo. You can download that for free at any time, just like all of our 17 books. The ebook versions are free. So if you don't have any funds, of course, you can download all 17 of our books immediately. And then the soft cover versions we do print in-house on our own printers in color, and those range between $8 and $11. You can order those books as well, Kokobo as well as the other 16. Any order of 10 books or more, automatically 30% off. So part of the process is we will be giving away a free copy of the Kokobo book to everyone who attends the event. The event is free, and then you receive a free copy of the book as well. At all of our events, we endeavor to give away at least one free copy of one of our 17 books. We've been able to do that, and now over the course, over a year and a half, we've been able to give away over 500 free copies of our softcover books to different events that we have gone through in different states, and we want to continue that process. And part of the Kokobo movement is that. So if you would like to assist in that process, any purchase of one or more of our books will assist us in being able to print out a couple of hundred books so we can give away those free books to the community. When people come into this information for the first time, if they can receive a free book and they're not being coerced to pay to get into an event, they can get in there for free. They're not feeling any pressure being recruited as part of some group and people trying to pressure them to join something. We don't do that. So they can come to an event. It's free. They can relax. They're not being pressured to be recruited. And at the same time, they receive a free book. Nobody's pressuring them to purchase anything. So the information is free-flowing, and it's detailed, it's accurate, and it's life-changing. And once they get that information, they can share it. We need to get these books, Kokobo books, proving that this sexuality, homosexuality was never accepted in ancient Kemet, into the hands of as many of our people, thousands of our people as possible. And we would like to give away as many free copies as we can. So of course, the ebook version is free, so thousands of people have downloaded that, and that's continuous. But we also need to get the softcover versions, the full-color softcover versions, in the hands of our people as well. So that's part of the movement. The more of our people get that information, the more they become grounded, they share with their children, co-workers, family members, friends, and so forth. So if you would like to support that process, any purchase of one or more of our books, or even a donation, if you would like to do that, you can do that on the NHOMA page, the publications page on our website, and we'll be posting the information later tonight with regard to the event notification and so forth. And we'll get that going. In fact, I'm going to put the link to the e-flyer in the chat room right now, and then we're going to be posting this information. We just got a confirmation as far as the date today, so this is why we just put the flyer out today, but we'll be posting more information. So, all right, so tonight's broadcast is a special broadcast. It's titled Awuku-adae or Awukudae, the Dream Stela, Tehuti Mesu, and Deity Empowerment and Ritual Purity. So today is Awukuda, which is Wednesday, but it's a special Awukuda and Awuku-adae. In the Akhan tradition, every 6th Wednesday, which is every 42 days, is an Awuku-adae, a special Wednesday. It's an ancestral observance. In between that 6-week cycle is a 6-week Kwesi or Awukudae cycle, an Awuku-adae or Kwesi-adae, sacred or ancestral Sunday. So you have, for example, September 26th with a Kwesi-adae or Awuku-adae, ancestral observance on that Sunday. Then 6 weeks later, which will be November 8th, is the next Kwesi-adae or ancestral observance on that sacred Sunday. In between that process, you have the little Adae or the Awuku-adae, the Wednesday Adae, the sacred Wednesday, and it's every 6 weeks as well. So September 26th was the Kwesi-adae, the sacred Sunday. Then 3.5 weeks later, the Awuku-adae, sacred Wednesday, ancestral observance Wednesday, and then 2.5 weeks after that is the next Kwesi-adae. So that's in the Akhan calendar culture. Adadria 9 is a 40-day calendar, 40-day ritual calendars, 40 days inclusive, which includes 6 weeks, which is 42 days, but you count the first day and the last day as the same. So we have that cycle. It's a constant cycle, 9 cycles of 42 days in an Akhan ritual year. So today happens to land on an Awuku-adae. It is the first Awuku-adae of our new year. Our new year began on September 23rd, the first day of the Autumn equinox, so-called fall equinox, and the first day of our year 13,016. We are in the midst of a 26,000 year astronomical cycle. Of course, we do not track time based on the fictional cartoon character Jesus who never existed. So, hence the year's beginning with 13,000. This is 13,016, which began nearly a month ago. This is the first Awuku-adae of our new year, and we want to deal with some specifics with regard to the nature of what that is in association with what is called the Dream Stela of Tehuti Mesu, so-called Tehuti Mesu IV. Often they'll write his name Thothmosis or Thothmosis IV, and so forth. But we wanted to get into that. The Dream Stela, we're going to put a link, and you can find various translations. We'll put a link in the chat room. You put Dream Stela, Google Dream Stela, you'll find various translations, transliterations, and so forth. It's a good time to deal with this concept and this practice, because dreams are used in a divinatory sense. They have an oracular function. Oracular divination, the term adebisa in Akhan meaning divination. Ade means things, objects, deeds, entities. Bisa is a verb meaning to ask, to inquire. So to call, bisa is to call, go, bisa, ask, meaning going to ask the Abosom, the deities, going to ask the Nsamanfo, the spirit, the ancestral spirit. Ade bisa are things that are asked, what has been divined for, divination. So when you talk about oracular divination, using an oracle to inquire of the Abosom and Nsamanfo, the deities and ancestral spirits, what is going on, what is my divine function in creation, am I in harmony with that, am I out of harmony with that, why are these things taking shape, what do I need to do to get back on track and so forth, what's coming up that I may not see, what is the nature of certain circumstances, how do they manifest, what is undergirding this manifestation of events that I'm not aware of and so forth. All these different kinds of questions are part of that oracular process. Dream, which is the term Adai, means a sleeping or a resting period, but it also means the dream state. Dreams are oracular in nature. The NHOMA, the spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors will communicate with us through the Adai state, the dream state. The Abosom, the forces in nature, the deities will communicate with us through the dream state. So it's oracular in its nature because they give us direction, admonition, intelligence, and so forth, all kinds of things through that state. When we talk about Awuku-adae, Adai meaning the sleeping or resting period, but also the Adai meaning the dream state, Awuku-adae, Awukuda Wednesday. This is a sacred Wednesday every 6th Wednesday. So you take a period, a resting period, Adai. You step back from what you normally are doing throughout the course of the day, and you go into the Adai state. Not in this sense, not the dream state, but it's a sleeping or resting period. It's also the ritual state. So you engage the Nsamanfo. You go to the ancestral shrines and so forth, give offerings and so forth, and go into that ritual state, the sleeping or resting period. When you go to sleep, you stop everything you're doing so you can go inward to rejuvenate, to replenish, and so forth, re-energize yourself so when you wake up, you can move forward in a harmonious fashion. When going through the course of life, we need to take a resting period, and Adai, go into the ritual state, engage the Nsamanfo, the ancestresses and ancestors are spiritually cultivated, engage the Abosom, the forces in nature who govern us, so that we can re-energize, realign ourselves, rejuvenate ourselves, so we can, once we come out of that ritual state, we can confront the world in a harmonious fashion and execute our function in creation harmoniously. And if we make mistakes, we can get back on track. Adai, or the dream state, which is also a ritual state. This is why the dream state is also oracular, so it therefore becomes a ritual state. So we're going to deal with the dream Stela of Tehuti Mesu, the fourth, and get into that, and we'll show its direct connection to this today, which is actually Awuku-adae, that's Sacred Ancestral Wednesday, and just to our people in general. Now, give a little bit of background to the Stela. It's found in between the paws of the Shesep and Ankh, misnomer the Sphinx, Shesep and Ankh, and Shesep dealing with light and illumination, Shesep and Ankh of life. So that's the title, which was corrupted. Shesep and Ankh becomes the Shefanak and the Shefanks and Shesphinx and Sphinx and Sphinx and all of that. White and offspring corrupting the title, but Shesep and Ankh, the dream Stela, is in between the paws of the Shesep and Ankh. It tells the story of Tehuti Mesu the fourth, who would eventually become the Ensu Bhakti, the king, the quote-unquote Ptah, took off Pharaoh and so forth. In the 18th dynasty, the eighth king in the 18th dynasty, eighth sovereign, that talks about what took place when he fell asleep and had a dream, and the divinity came to him in his dream to inform him of what his destiny, his divine function in creation was. And therefore, when he came out and he was shown what he needed to do to fulfill and get himself on track for that divine function, so-called destiny or life focus. So that's what the Stela records, what took place, that experience that took place, and he erected a stela to commemorate what took place. So that's why they call it the dream Stela, to the actual text itself, and then we're going to get into the cosmology that undergirds and make some comparisons and show how this has to do with empowerment from divinities and the nature of ritual purity and the importance of that. On the left-hand side of the Stela, titles of the sovereign, the king of upper and lower Kemet, lord of the two lands, Men Kapara, Tehuti Mesu, the appearance of appearances bestowed with life. And he's greeting the divinity with the Nemset Ve, spoken by the Shesepinak, Herakuti, I give strength to the Lord of the two lands, Tehuti Mesu, the appearance of appearances. In the middle of the Stela, spoken by the Shesepinak, the divinity, I make it so that Men Keper Ra appears on the throne of Geb, and Tehuti Mesu, talking about Tehuti Mesu the third, the appearance of appearances in the position of Atem. On the right-hand side, the inscription says, the king of upper and lower Kemet, lord of the two lands, Men Keper Ra, Tehuti Mesu, talking about the fourth, the appearance of appearances bestowed with life, making an offering of incense and a libation. And then Heru and Aket, Heru in the horizon says, I give strength to the Lord of the two lands, Tehuti Mesu, the appearance of appearances. And so these are the various titles that you see on the left, middle, and right side. Now, the main text. And before we get into that, I just want to make sure we got the chat room piece going. All right. Okay, so the main text. Year one. And if there's any, just want to make sure, if there's any problem with the sound, just let us know in the chat room. Okay. Now let's get back to the text. Okay, so the main text. Year one, the third month of Aket, on the 19th day of the majesty of Heru, the victorious Ka, the victorious bull, perfect of appearances. The two ladies talking about Wachet and Nekabet, kingship like Atem, the golden Heru, strong of sword, who subdues the 9 bows, the king of upper and lower Kemet, Men Kapara, the son of Ra, Tehuti Mesu, talking about Tehuti Mesu the fourth, the appearance of appearances, beloved of Heru Maket, bestowed with life, stability, and authority like Ra eternally. May the good divinity live, the son of Atem. All of these are titles of Tehuti Mesu the fourth. It looks like the sound had dropped for a second. Okay, so let us know. It should be back on now. Okay, it's back on now. All right. So every now and then that happens with Blog Talk. So we're just starting that second portion of the main text, so you don't miss anything. May the good divinity live, which is Nefer Ntoro, the son of Atem, who protects Herakuti, the living image of Neb Erjer, the Lord of all, the limits and so forth, the sovereign, created by Ra, the excellent heir of Kapra, with a face as beautiful as that of his father, who came forth complete, equipped with his form of Heru upon him, the king of upper and lower Kemet, beloved of the Ntorotu divinities, the possessor of charm, with the company of the divinities, who has purified Anu, so-called Heliopolis, who appeases Ra, who has decorated the temple of Ptah, who presents Ma'at to Atem, and who rises her before the one who is south of his wall, which is talking about Ptah, who makes monuments as a daily offering to Heru, who does all things, who seeks what is beneficial for the divinities of the south and the north, who builds their temples in white stone, who decorates all their offerings, the bodily son of Atem, Tehuti Mesu the fourth, of course. Appearance of appearances like Ra, the heir of Heru upon his throne, Men Keper, Ra bestowed with the life. All of that were honorific titles, talking about the sovereign, all the various things that he had done, and so forth, his character, his nature, his descent, his lineage, his blood circle connected to specific divinities, as well as his, lineage as a king, rightful heir to the throne. So all of those were just honorific titles. Now, behold, when His Majesty was a youngster, like Heru in Kem, his beauty like that of the one who protects his father, talking about Heru, the protector of his father Alsar. He's similar to him in radiance, who is seen like the divinity himself, like Heru himself. The army rejoiced in his love. The royal children and all the chieftains were in his power, making him flourish. And he repeated the laugh in the head said ritual. His strength like that of the son of Nut, talking about Set. Behold, he engaged in a pastime, amusing himself in the desert of Aneb-Hech, which is Menefer, upon his northern and southern road, shooting at a bronze target, hunting lions and flocks, riding in his chariot, his horses faster than wind, along with only 2 of his followers while no one knew about it. Then the hour came to give rest to his followers at the limbs of Heru Imaket, title of the great Shesep-Enanko, the Sphinx. The Shesep-Enanko is the entity, the divinity governing that entity is Heru Imaket, which is Heru, or the great divinity Heru Behudet, and so forth. It's the same great Heru divinity, not Heru, son of Alsar and Alset, but Heru, the son of Ra. He's called Ogun in Yoruba tradition and Benna in the Akan tradition. Ogun and Vodun. So the hour came to give rest to his followers at the limbs of Heru Imaket, talking about in front of the great statue, beside the divinity Seker and Ra Setjal, beside Renutet, the female divinity Renutet in northern Jimmy, beside the female divinity Mut, the mistress of the northern wall and the mistress of the southern wall, Sechima or Sekhmet, who presides over her Ka, son of Heka, the holy place of the first time of creation, near the lords of Keraha, the divine road of the divinities, towards the west of Anu. So he's taking rest in this sacred region where these sanctuaries of the various divinities are. So he's about to take a rest there. Now then, the great statue of Kepra was lying in this place, great of power and powerful of majesty, the shadow of Ra resting upon it. The estates of Ptah, the temple of Ptah and Menefer, and all of the neighboring cities come to it, their arms raised in adoration before him, carrying many offerings for his Ka, meaning people from all around, the various cities all around will come giving offerings to Heru Imaket, the great divinity whose spirit takes up residence in this great shrine, the so-called Shesep-Enanko, the Sphinx. They would give offerings to the Ka of this divinity. This divinity is worshipped through this great shrine. One of those days, it so happened that the prince, Tehuti Mesu, came passing by at the time of midday, and he sat down in the shadow of this great divinity. Sleep seized him, asleep at the time when the sun was at the zenith, and he found the majesty of this noble divinity speaking with his own mouth, like the words of a father for his son, saying, and this is what Heru Imaket, the great divinity whose shrine is the Shesep-Enanko, the Sphinx, said to Tehuti Mesu after he fell asleep and went into the Adai state, the sleep state, which now became a ritual state, and now an oracular communication comes forth, and the spirit of the divinity comes forth to speak directly to Tehuti Mesu, the young prince. The divinity says, "Look at me, see me, my son Tehuti Mesu. I am your father, Heru Imaket, Kepra Atem, and I shall give you the kingship on earth in front of all the living ones. You shall wear the white and the red crown upon the throne of Geb, the hereditary prince. The earth shall be yours in its length and width, all that the eye of the Lord of all, Neb Erjer Atem, illuminates. The food of the two lands shall be yours, and the great tribute of every foreign land. Your lifetime will be a time, great in years. My face is yours. My heart is yours, as you are protected to me. For my present condition is like one that is in need. All my limbs are dismembered as the sands of the desert upon which I lie have reached me. So run to me to have that done which I desire, knowing that you are my son, my protector. Come forth, and I shall be with you. I shall be your leader. When he finished these words, the prince stared, woke up at what he had heard. He understood the words of this divinity, and he put a silence in his heart, meaning he began to meditate on the words of the divinity. Then he said, let us hasten back to our home in the city. We shall set aside an offering for this deity, and we shall bring him oxen, all the vegetables, and our arms shall be raised in adoration to those who were there before us. Noble Ka Af Ra, the statue made for Atim Ra Heru Maket, days of festivities many of my majesty for her living for Kepra in the horizon of the west of Anu. So that's the end of the text. So what happened was he was out hunting and so forth. He fell asleep at the foot of the Shesepinah, the shrine for Heru Maket, the divinity. When he fell asleep, the divinity comes to him and begins to communicate directly with him and tells him about his divine function, his so-called destiny, but as we say, divine function, the executing creation, the deity that he was born under. And we can understand what's really taking place because we, of course, when you engage ancestral religious practices, you understand that before we come into the world, our spirit is drawn into the womb. Before that takes place, we are given divine function to executing creation that is encoded within our Ka, our Ka or Kae, the Okra, the soul, the divine consciousness, the spirit's brain, the divinity that dwells in the head region. So, when we're given that divine function to executing creation, then we're ascended to the womb. And then as we grow and develop, we understand and learn what that divine function is that is encoded within our Kra. We communicate with our Kra, communicate with the deity that dwells in the head region, our own personal divinity. If we become fuzzy with regard to that, then divination can be done. Adebisa can be conducted. And when divination is done, the person who's conducting or performing the divination is communicating with the Kra of the individual, the Krawa of the individual, the soul, the divine consciousness of the individual, to show the individual externally through divination what the spirit, the soul of the person was telling the spirit of the person internally, but the person was not able to hear. So your Kra, the divinity dwelling in your head region, is informing you of what you should be doing, what you shouldn't be doing, what's in harmony with divine order for you, what's not in harmony, what is a spiritual taboo, a dietary taboo, a ritual taboo, a social taboo, what you should be observing, what you should be restricting yourself from, and so forth, to keep you in harmony with order, and what you should be paying attention to. But because you may be distracted, you're not spiritually receptive for one reason or another, you cannot hear or see or feel what your Kra is pulling you towards, and you keep making mistakes, having physiological problems, health issues, financial issues, relationship issues, suffering from car crashes and other kinds of quote-unquote accidents and all different kinds of things. Just a number of different kinds of things. And you know there's something wrong, but you're too stressed. You've allowed yourself to become too stressed to be able to be still enough to attune yourself to what's going on. So you engage a ritual process to try to learn. If you're not receptive enough, you get to someone who is very receptive, someone who has the capacity to attune to the forces of nature, the hoodoo man, the hoodoo woman, and so forth, the so-called priest and priestess, and they go engage the divinatory process, ask the Abosom, the Nehem and Nsamanfo, the Great Mother and Great Father, Nyame Wat, Nyame, the Supreme Being, what is in harmony with order, what should be given to this individual, what is the message, what are you trying to show them? And the Kra of the individual because it's a divinity in and of itself, will communicate with the priest or priestess. The Abosom will communicate with them. The Nsamanfo will communicate with them, and they will show you externally through the divination what your cry has been trying to tell you internally. So that's a divinatory process. He engaged the divinatory process himself. He fell asleep. That's one of the best ways to deal with that. Hold on one second. Okay. So, he was going through that divinatory process. Hold on one second, one more time. Okay, so apologies for that little break. So what was happening is, as we said, it was a divinatory practice, and this is what he engaged in. So let's go to the NSAMANKOM and the seven senses. That's one of the articles we posted in the that we're posting in the chat room right now. And we talk about the different ways that the Abosom and Nsamanfo communicate with us. We talk about seven senses because there are more than just five. You have the five senses, of course, but then you also have your sense of balance and sense of time. So beyond smell and taste and sight and hearing and feeling, you also have a sense of balance, which your existence is dependent upon, because if your sense of balance is off, you can't function properly. You also have a sense of time, which also includes spatial consideration. Now, you also have seven spiritual senses. Just like you have physical sight, some people can see beyond the physical. They're clairvoyant. You have physical, the capacity to hear. Some people can hear beyond the physical. They're clairaudient. Some people can feel beyond the physical, feel a spirit moving through the room and so forth. They're clairsentient. Some people can smell beyond the physical. When a spirit comes into the room, the smell changes. They can pick up, just like a dog can pick up on a scent. You can pick up on the smell, the energy of that spirit. The person is clairalien. Some people, the taste buds change when they're engaged spiritually, and they get a certain taste in their mouth depending on what kind of spirit is coming forth. They're clairgustant, but then you also have what we call clairequilibrant. Your sense of balance shifts. Some people become dizzy when a spirit comes to possess or even moves through the room in their area. There's a shift in your balance. There's also what we would call clairtimiant, a shift in the time continuum when you engage the spirit realm. And we experience that even on a basic, fundamental, mundane level when you fall asleep and you're awakened by your alarm clock. You hit the snooze for 5 minutes. You fall back asleep. You have a number of experiences that normally would last for hours, and then you're only to be awakened 5 minutes later. And clearly, in the physical aspect of time, you would not be able to fit all of those things into a 5-minute period. But spiritually, because the energy of the spirit moves much faster, you can have all of those experiences in detail, yet it all fits within that 5-minute period. Because there's a shift in the time continuum between the spirit world and the physical world, so there's clairtimiant. There's a shift in the time continuum when the spirit moves through and interacts with you, and the next thing you know, you thought you were sitting at the shrine for 5 minutes, and 45 minutes have gone by because there's a shift. So we talk about the seven, and we get into detail about that. Of course, I both some govern these seven senses, but then we also get into this notion of utilizing the dream state. And the Nsamanfo will communicate with us when we're dreaming. Now, and that's later on in the article. Some of our people may not be as receptive physically when we're awake. We may not be clairvoyant. We can't see a spirit walking around. We may not be clairaudient yet. May not be able to hear them very clearly or feel them or smell them or, all those different things. But one direct way that the NSAMANKOM communicate with us, two direct ways. Number one, they plant thoughts in our sphere of awareness, in our consciousness. And the more you engage susuho or meditation, direct communication, then you begin to learn the nature of your own thoughts and formulations. And when a foreign, quote-unquote, thought, something that you did not generate, enters into your sphere of awareness, into your consciousness, and they begin to communicate by planting thoughts. That's what when you're awake throughout the course of the day, as well as when you're engaged in ritual practice. But then the other piece is the dreaming piece. When you fall asleep, now you are really receptive in that sense, and even the most unreceptive individual, when they fall asleep, their defenses drop, their anxiety, subsides to a certain extent, and they become receptive enough where the NSAMANFO, the spirits of their ancestors and ancestors, can communicate with them, come into their dreams. They can have vivid dreams, detailed dreams, and so forth, and receive those communications. So we understand that sometimes when you're dreaming, it's simply you're replaying things that you've been thinking about throughout the course of the day or years. Sometimes it's something deeply embedded psychologically, spiritually, that you're attempting to work out. But then you also have dreams where your NSAMANKOM, your spiritually cultivated ancestors and ancestors, as well as others, are seeking to communicate with you, and they do. The Abosom communicate with you, and they have that capacity to teach, to show you specific things, show you when you're on the right track, when you've gotten off of the right track, what you need to do to get back on the right track. So all of those things are taking place in the dream state. Now, when Tehuti Mesu was engaged in his activity, there's a difference between this particular text, for example, and the Stela of Kunwimu or Kunun, where they're talking about in ancient Kemet, the 7-year famine and so forth. And that particular text, we did a broadcast on that, where the country was suffering because the river had not risen to its proper height in 7 years. People were starving and so forth. The king sent a messenger out to find out, going down to the south of the country, what divinity governs the inundation of the river, what is going on, what's taking place, what should be, what ritual practices needs to be engaged in so we can realign ourselves with order so that, we can get the river to begin to rise to its proper height. And so the messenger was sent down there to find out. They found out what, all the information about the shrine and the nature of the divinities and so forth. And eventually the king communicated with Kunwimu, and he went before the statue of the divinity, but he went to go invoke the divinity at the shrine of the divinity. And when he invoked the divinity at the shrine, then the spirit of the divinity came forward and began to speak to the king and so forth, showing him what needed to be done. And he was showing that the shrines of the deities had been neglected and had fallen into disrepair. And because of that fact, people were not harmonizing with divine order. And because of that fact, then the river did not rise for 7 years. So in the same fashion, where you decide you're not going to put the right foods in your body, and for a while you're doing all right, but then your health begins to deteriorate, and you don't understand why your health is deteriorating because you've been doing the same thing for a number of months or even a couple of years and so forth. So you're like, well, it couldn't be my diet and so forth because I've been eating the same way for a while. But you didn't realize that you were stripping your nutrients away every moment of every day, and eventually it began to manifest in the form of an illness. So then you go seek to find out, what do I need to do to get the blood flowing properly again, and what do I need to do? What do I need to add to my body? What do I need to add to my diet? What do I need to feed my cells, my organs, in order to get the energy and the blood and everything else flowing in a harmonious fashion? In the same way that takes place within a community. As a community, if we're out of harmony with order, then the free-flowing energy of the Abosom we make ourselves repulsive to, and we repel, so we don't receive that. So we need to figure out what is going on. Why are we repelling the natural flow of divine energy coming from the Abosom that would otherwise place us in harmony with order? What are we doing to block that? What we need to do to get back in harmony? What are we not digesting? What are we taking in that we need to purge from our own system so we can fill ourselves up with that energy of the Abosom, the forces of nature, and the guidance from the NSAMANKOM? So when you look at the Kunwimu Stela, this is what they're talking about. People had fallen into disorder. They were suffering, as the country itself was suffering for a number of years. And that went down to the people, the families, individuals, and so forth, sickness, disease, fighting, wars, and everything else because they were struggling, they were suffering. So they go to the divinity to find out what they need to do to get back in harmony with order to restore balance to their lives. So when we talk about the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance, in this case, how do you restore balance? This is what the Kunwimu or the Kunum Stele is talking about, this so-called 7 years famine. In this particular text, Tehuti Mesu the fourth, he's not suffering, he's not struggling, he's doing all right. He's having fun, he's, hunting and everything else. He's doing what he wants to do. But then he falls asleep. And when he falls asleep, then he discovers through that oracular divinatory process that, it seems like everything is all right. So I don't really need anything. Everything is good. So now the NSAMANKOM and the Abosom will come to you when you're most receptive. You're not being receptive in this sense, not because you're being criminal or you're being neglectful per se. Like with the Kunum Stele, people were being neglectful, operating out of harmony with order, creating disorder. So then they suffer for that disorder. And now that they're suffering, they're trying to ask, what do we need to do to get back in harmony with order? So they realize that they've gotten out of harmony with order, and they're trying to figure out a way to get back in harmony, restore balance to their lives. In this instance, Tehuti Mesu is not suffering. He thinks everything is fine. So he's not even seeking to figure out a way to align with order because he consciously and unconsciously assumes that he is in harmony with order. So the Abosom have to show him what he needs to do to incorporate law. So the incorporation of law is the expansive pole of order. The restoration of divine balance is the contractive pole. You get out of harmony with order, then you restore balance. That's the contractive pole. But what about the incorporation of law? You may be doing all right now, or it appears that way, but there are other things you need to be incorporating so you can fulfill your function and fully embrace that. Because even if you seem to be doing all right and you're not creating disorder consciously, ultimately, if you're not executing your divine function in the world, you're still, in a sense, out of order because you're not doing what you came into the world to do. So he's assuming everything is fine. He's doing what he normally does. And therefore, they come to him in his sleep so they can move him forward and show him what is his divine function, what is his destiny, what is his life focus, what did he come into the world to execute. And then what does he need to do to get in harmony with that and secure the protection and secure the infusion, constant infusion of energy from the Abosom that governs him. He fell asleep under the statue of this particular Abosom because this is the Abosom that governs him. So what does he need to do to maintain that link, maintain that flow of energy so he does not block it, so he can utilize that energy to become the kind of king, the Ensu that he needs to be. So he falls asleep. The Abosom draw him to that region. The NSAMANKOM draw him to that region so that he can fall asleep in front of the Shesepanah. He didn't come out at the beginning of the day and saying, I'm going to go and fall asleep at the foot of the statue. They lured him in that direction, lured him to the place where he normally hunts and everything else and has fun. The NSAMANKOM push him in that direction. The Abosom pull him in that direction so that he can fall asleep in front of the shrine, so that the Abosom can come to him, so he can be at his most receptive condition, which is for him the sleep state at this particular time. They come forward and infuse him with the knowledge of his divine function. he is going to be the king. He was born to be the king. Certain things he needs to do to secure that position and place himself in harmony with that divine function. So first, he must clear the sand away from the divinity, the shrine of the divinity that governs him, and the other kings as well. But the shrine of the divinity that governs him needs to be purified, needs to be clean, needs to be, all the sand needs to be swept away, offerings to be given to the divinity. So once he clears away the debris and purifies the ritual space, and then gives offering to the divinity to provoke the energy of the divinity, then the response is the free flow of energy from the divinity to the child, to Tehuti Mesu, the fourth, so that he's in alignment with that divinity's energy. Just like you can have a magnet far away from another magnet on the table, as soon as it begins to get close, then it gets into the field, and then it jumps to the other magnet. There's an alignment that takes place, a connection that takes place. They jump together and so forth. So once we get into the orbit, when we were out of harmony with the divinity, whether through consciously getting out of harmony or just through neglect, not paying attention, and just far away from the magnet, not totally 100% out of the field, the electromagnetic field of the magnet, the large magnet, but we're so far away that we're not being drawn and jumping through the magnet. We're so far away that we can just feel some sensation. But then we begin to make ourselves come closer to that larger magnet, get closer to that field of energy. And once we get in the field, then we're drawn in. In the same fashion, once we start moving closer to the Abosom that govern us consciously through our thoughts, intentions, and actions, engage in ritual purification, cleansing ourselves, moving the sand away, so the full manifestation of our physical vessel, which is a shrine for the divinity, clearing the debris, clearing the sand away, clearing the debris and sand away from our physical body, purifying ourselves as well as our spirit body, so that we can be an open vessel. So we can be like a wind chime when the energy is moving, the wind moving through a wind chime, it begins to resonate and reverberate the sound. When we clean ourselves up inside and out, then our physical bodies and spirit bodies become like those wind chimes. So when the energy moves through it, it's unclogged, it's free flowing, and we become in the orbit of the divinity. We're drawn into that, and now we're drawn into divine order. And anytime this order comes along, we can repel it with ease. So we engage the same process. We go through the dream state. We connect with the Abosom through the dream state, and they show us what we need to incorporate to align ourselves with order. They also show us what we need to do with regard to rejection, repulsion, hate of things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to reject in order to realign ourselves with divine order. So this Stela is talking about a ritual process that we go through on a regular basis. This is not just some little fancy story to legitimize the rule of Tehuti Mesu IV, because maybe he wasn't supposed to be the ruler and he, overthrew the legitimate heir, and therefore he had to create Stela to, manufacture a divine reason for him to be a ruler. That's what a lot of these Egyptologists and others will write about the Stela. They totally missed the entire point. We're talking about oracular divination, communicating with the deity that governs our krawa, our head. And when he says he became silent in his heart so that he could attune, at first he was just going around hunting and playing and everything else and fell asleep. But once the divinity connected with him and spoke directly with him, and of course when we talk about engaging ritual, this is not abstract either. When you engage in divinatory processes, you will see the Abosom and they will speak directly to you. You will hear them, you will see them, you will feel them, and so forth. This is reality, which of course is lost on the white Nile Spring, and our people were brainwashed by the white Nile Spring. So at first he was just doing his thing, frolicking and so forth, but at the same time, just by nature of the fact that that's all he was doing, he was neglecting who he was and what his function was to a certain extent. So the Abosom draw him in, the NSAMANKOM draw him into their orbit, make him to fall asleep right up under the shrine so that they can have an optimal communication with him, and they feed him that information. And once he comes out of his sleep, comes out of his trance and so forth, then he put a silence upon his heart, meaning he took silence, became contemplative, meditative, and so forth, and then he moved forward. We're going to purify this shrine, clear the sand away, give offerings, realign with the divinity that governs my head so that I can execute my function in creation. And this is a roadmap for us as well. Every moment of every day, this is what we need to engage in with regard to realigning with the Kra, or the soul, the divine consciousness in our head region. So we're gonna we have a call on the phone line. We had some comments, I think, in the chat room. So we're gonna take a call. If you have a question or a comment on the phone line, you can hit the number 1 so that we can see that your hand is raised. If you have a question or a comment in the chat room, you must log in as a user in the chat room in order to interact in the chat room. If you don't have a username in Blog Talk, you can sign up for one quickly in Blog Talk. On the phone line, number 2557, you had a question or a comment? Okay, number 2557 on the phone line. Okay, so just want to make sure. All right. And if anybody else has any questions on the phone line, maybe that person was just listening, hit the number 1 so we can see that your hand is raised. All right. Hold on 1 second. I'm just pulling this information back up. Just give me 1 second, taking a minute. So, but the key here is we want to make sure we drive home the point that this specific text and all of these different texts, they are not just quote unquote true historical texts. Every time you see a stele, every time you see a coffin text, but even very often these true historical or so-called historical monuments, they're not just chronology. They're not just stories of what took place. They have a ritual component. They are ritual manuals for our people. They're dealing with different aspects of ritual practice that we need to engage on a regular basis and that you find wherever Afurakani people exist in the world. The cleaning of shrines, the maintenance of shrines, purifying shrines. Of course, you see in the Pertinent Heru, the so-called 42 declarations of innocence, talking about they would not despoil the shrines of the divinities and so forth, cleansing the shrines. If you look at the stele of Kunum, so-called Kunum or Kunwimu, they're talking about the shrines have fallen into disuse and so forth, and they need to be re-established and rededicated, purified, so that the energy of the Abosom can freely flow through these vessels, these points of resonance that are what shrines really are. You'll find that throughout the text. You'll find that in ancestral religion across the board on the continent, as well as in the Western Hemisphere, hoodoo and juju and so forth, purifying the shrines of our ancestresses and ancestors, whether it's changing the water, food, and so forth, making offerings on a regular basis, whether you're eating food or when you're going to the shrine to give food, give clean water, and so forth. That purificatory energy allows the free flow of energy so you can be achieve that optimal level of communication and direction. All right. Hold on 1 second. So we're pulling up the UBEN-HYENG. In the meantime, as we're pulling that up, we have another call on the phone line. The TLO number 2081. You got a question or a comment?
Yes, Madase, Kwesi. My question, in regards to the ancient time in Egypt, when people were we had pharaohs and queens, empress, what were the people during that time that lived, that doing regular things in society? What were their names? That's my question.
What? You said what were their?
Yeah, you know how most of them they call King Tut, or they got certain names, but what was the average person, man, woman, and child, used to call their names or give names to each other during the ancient time?
Now, are you talking about in the sense of the kinds of individual names that they use?
Yes, correct, yes.
Like naming practices and things like that?
Yeah, like what was that, like your names, like how most people, like they lost their name and they take on European names. What people back then used to call themselves, like names-wise.
Oh, okay. So, but now it's very similar. So, if you look, for example, at the list of all of the different kings, like there are various kings lists, like the list of Seti and the list on the so-called Turin Papyrus, a number of different lists, and you see the various names of the king, as well as queen mothers and so forth. They're very similar as well. When you look at texts of commoners and like the eloquent peasant and things like that, and just, invoice texts and texts for husbands writing about their wives, or somebody writing about, a little papyrus text or shards of pottery and so forth, writing about their deceased relatives and things like that. All these different documents you find, just basic day-to-day documents beyond the ritual stuff. You'll find they have similar names. And of course, they're using the language, the deities that are connected to them. They have names based on the deities who are connected to them, deities connected to their patriclan, deities connected to their matriclan, and deities connected to their own ka. So you'll find that across the board. It's no different than, and just of course in the language, so it's no different than the Yoruba tradition or Akhan, whatever. People are connected, their families are connected to certain deities. The families connected to certain ancestresses and ancestors, certain clans. They have a certain kind of attribute, like being called Ka, the great bull, or Abu, the great elephant, or, Basa, the leopard, or something like that. Times of year that they were born, all kinds of different circumstantial type names, circumstantial birth names, as they will call them. The same kinds of naming practices we have all over the continent today, exactly the same way then, it's just in their own language.
So none really comes to like the 7-day cycle, like Kojo, what do you call it, Kojo, anything like that during ancient time?
Well, now in ancient Kemet, like we established the 7-day cycle and made it popular after we migrated. Some of our people migrated north of Kemet. For example, you have Kanat, which is the title of Nubia. When the people of Kanat, or the Khan land, the first land, foremost land of the south, Kanat, Nubia, and so forth. But some of our people migrated further north and settled Kemet prior to it being called Kemet or Ta-Meri. It was called the Khan land or Kanat land as well. And then later on, it became known as Kemet and Ta-Meri and so forth. So Kanat, in the region of Kanat, it was so-called Nubia, Sudan, moving up into the region of what will later be called Kemet and Ta-Meri. But before that, it was called Khan or Kanat, the interior, and so forth. Still the first land, the interior, and so forth. Then those same people moving from the Kanat land, moving up into the so-called Levant, and calling the region Kanana, so-called Canaan, but Kanana, utilizing the same terminology before the whites and their offspring invaded, worshiping the same deity. Amen, Osar, Ra, Ra'et, Set, Nebet-Het, Aset, Heru, the same divinity. Migrated up into those regions, and you'll see the way their iconography looks exactly like that of ancient Kemet. And we established in those regions and made it popular that 7-day cycle based on the Abosom that govern the 7 days of the week and so forth, solar, lunar, and planetary bodies that govern the 7 days of the week. Of course, that was in the region of, so-called Levant, so-called Kanana, later be called Palestine and Israel and all of that. But before all of that happened, of course, there was no such thing as any Hebrews ever existing anywhere. And then, of course, into what would be called Sumer and later Babylon and the Akkadian Empire and all of that. Even prior to all of that, our people, the people of ancient Kanat, so-called Nubians, and migrated into those regions. Of course, we even migrated further into ancient so-called Indian and everything. But we carried that same culture, that same structure, and established it and made it popular in those regions. And of course, when you look at ancient Sumer, and then later the Akkadian Empire, prior to the white invasions, and then after the whites, they would adopt the calendar and, of course, bring corruption. But we still have the 7 days of the week, deities connected to the sun, moon, and the planets that govern the 7 days, and names based on those days. So people be named after those divinities because they were born on those days. So that was taking place once we migrated to different regions. And then you'll find some people on the continent maintain that 7-day structure, but then other people, based on where they migrated to and what they were involved in their cultural structure, they focused on a different set of days. So, for example, the Igbo have a 4-day week dealing with those 4 market days. You'll have 7 sets of those 4 market days, which is 28-day cycle. You have the Yoruba people who have that 5-day inclusive week. So depending on what's the structure of the culture, the weeks, the length of weeks shifts with regard to the structure of the culture and what their focus is. But they still have a means by which they can find out ritually what divinity governs their crop and what name should be associated with their crop. So everybody has a method for that. It just differs between the groups.
All right. I think it makes more clear sense. Because I always wonder when we use 7-day cycle to give ourselves our soul name, I never think of it, or even friends references about what happened back ancient time if they still carry those soul names back then now, and we're named the same way how most people try and reclaim their name at this moment. But I think you answered my question. But that's for that.
Okay. And Yenya said, we appreciate the talk. And there was another piece to that. So in Kemet, of course, the topography was different, and it very rarely rained in ancient Kemet. So there was a different kind of focus with regard to the structure of the calendar. Different focus with regard to the incorporation of astronomical events in the culture, because it hardly ever rains, so you're constantly seeing, all of the different stars, the constellations, and how they impact us in a major way, as opposed to when we move towards the savanna and into the forest belt, as many of our people did in the Akhan tradition. Things begin to change and the focus is different. So in ancient Kemet, there was a 10-day week, and then you have, of course, the 36 decan, 36 constellations, and then you have those 10 days. When you go through that entire process, 360 days, plus the 5 intercalary days, or epigomenal days at the end of the year, and that's the civil calendar. So that the constellations taking position every 10 days, making a quote-unquote week, and then the different constellation manifesting, so a different divinity governing that. So you have divinities governing those 36 decans that govern the entire, breadth of the sky and so forth. So this is slightly different. Depending on, where we are, we make those adjustments. We align with the energy of the region where we are. People move into the forest belt regions, the language changes slightly, takes on the nuances of the sounds of the forest. So you have the click languages coming from the Khoikhoi and the San people and so forth. When you migrate to riverine areas or desert regions or mountainous regions, savanna regions, colder regions, warmer regions, that affects the way people speak, that affects their cadence, that affects whether they have a drawl or not, that affects the way they move. Are they moving faster, or are they more laid back in hot areas, moving faster in cold areas and so forth, and that also affects the way they speak and the way they intone sound. So a number of different things take place, but also the nature of the energy of the mountainous region, what divinities animate the mountainous region, what divinities animate that local river, what divinities animate that forest region, what ancestral spirits are connected there. So that changes the way we operate. Just like we move to one region, if you're living in a tropical region for years, and then you move to a place where it snows in the wintertime, then you have to make an adjustment to make sure you can maintain your equilibrium. In the same way, you move to a different region of Asase Afur, the Earth Mother, the energy is different in the southern region with regard to a northern region or the eastern region of the planet, western region with regard to the land masses. The western region is different from the eastern region. The energy is different. The northern region is different from the southern. So we take stock of where we are, take note of that, acknowledge that, and incorporate that based on where we are. Okay. And that includes food choices and everything else. All right. Okay, so there's a question in the chat room. Last year I was talking to my Christian sister, and she asked me if I was having dental problems, and this was just before I had some teeth extracted. Is it possible that she actually used her senses to hear this over the phone? I talked to her as I usually would. So some people, they're clairaudient. Some people are clairsentient. Some people are clairvoyant, as we were saying. Some people, if they're clairaudient, you're projecting. You're projecting your thoughts. Some people are clairvoyant. You're projecting your thoughts. And some people are clairsentient. So you're projecting your thoughts, projecting your desires, projecting your anxieties, projecting your fears, just by virtue of the fact that you're contemplating something. It's generating a field of energy, and you're projecting that. That's just across the board all the time. Now, people who are more receptive, they can pick up on that. It's always happening, but everybody's just not receptive, so they can't tune in and see your, the images, your imagination, the images that you're generating in your mind. If you're thinking about, if you're thinking about a specific car that you would like, what color it is, you want a green 2-door coupe, and you envision that, and you're thinking about, man, I wish I had that car. Some people thinking like that. Then you, somebody who's clairvoyant, you're generating that image in your spirit. Just by virtue of the fact that you can image it, you created a luminous image within your spirit. Just like when you're dreaming, your body's laying in the bed, sleep, it's in the dark, in the silence, but you're having dreams. But your eyes are closed. There's nothing luminous happening in the room. That's happening within your spirit. But it is luminous matter. If someone's clairvoyant, when you generate that luminous matter, they can see that. Or if you have a desire and you're thinking about something and you're projecting what you're thinking about, people who are clairaudient can pick up on that. If you're having pain, anxiety, fear, anxiousness, whatever it is, and you're constantly emanating that just by virtue of the fact that you have those energetic projections, someone who's a little bit receptive can attune to that, and they know you're worried about your extraction. They know you're about to go here. You know you don't really want to go. You're thinking about all these things. You're simply projecting it. It's no different than if you got on the phone and said out loud what you were thinking, or got on a broadcast with or iPhone live and, talked about what you were feeling. People can attune to that, and they can, repeat it if they're slightly receptive. And some people, they don't have to train for that. They come into the world with, it's not, as we talked about before, it's not always an indication of connection with divine energy any more than communicating with a physical person. You can communicate when that person makes their transition. If they were a criminal type individual when they were alive, and the spirit separates from the body, they're still a perverse criminal type spirit with negative energy and so forth, and you can communicate with that deceased spirit. That disembodied communication in and of itself does not equate to divine order or connecting with the divine. Sometimes people are just communicating with criminal type deceased spirit, and some will seek to pass that off of communication with the divine, which is not. So we always have to make that point. Okay, so on the phone line, number 5808, you have a question or a comment?
Michelle.
Yeah, Michelle, what's up?
Michelle, thank you for taking my call. I've been off and on the call, so my question may not be directly related, but since you were talking about the dream state, I've always wanted to know what it means when someone doesn't dream or doesn't recall their dreams. Is it that they're in NSAMANKOM and their Akra isn't speaking to them, isn't communicating, or they're just completely tuned out? Because I've come across people who say, I don't dream, or I don't remember my dreams at all. I've never remembered any dream that I've ever had. And that strikes me as strange. And now that I'm learning, that dreams are often an ancestral communication, I wonder if you have any insight into what that means when a person doesn't dream or doesn't recall their dream.
Well, now it always depends. It always depends on the case, what's going on with the person. Some people say, well, I never dream, but they're having dreams. And again, dreaming in Akan culture, Awuku-adae, going into that resting period, which is also a ritual space. So they're going into the ritual space because they're going to sleep, right? So their spirit is still, their spirit didn't die, it's still active. So they're having experiences. Now, whether they suppress those experiences, so sometimes you can say, well, I didn't have any dreams last night. But then something happens during the day and it triggers exactly what you dreamed about, and then you realize you did dream last night, but you weren't thinking about it until the trigger came. And then you realize, man, I had a dream about that last night. You weren't thinking about it at all day. Some people have that same experience. It's just more extended. It's, for months or years. It doesn't mean that there is no activity. It means that for one reason or another, they're either not acknowledging or possibly suppressing. Now, it could be a situation where some people, their communication with their NSAMANKOM comes more so through clairvoyance, clairaudience, or through other kinds of means, or them directly planting thoughts in the head and so forth, as opposed to the focus on dreaming. Sometimes people cut off their consciousness of the dreaming because of what they're engaged in, even dietarily, as well as behaviorally, cutting certain things off, and then they have to try to get the information in another fashion. So it kind of depends on what's going on with the individual. Some people are, just more receptive in other ways, but they are having some experiences. But what will happen is when they begin to engage ritual practice on a regular basis, even the ones who are saying, well, I've never dreamed or I don't dream, they will start to, experience more activity during the sleep state.
And is there something that someone can do to help them to be more in tune, to be more open to, messages through dreams, if they're completely resistant to it?
Now, they're completely resistant to dreams, just period? Just dreaming, just period? Or trying to...
Yeah, if they're like, I don't even, I don't care about it, and it just means nothing to them.
Well, now, in that sense, it wouldn't be a thing where it's a system in being more receptive to the dream state if they're already trying to, reject it, which may be an indication of what's already going on. Because if they're constantly like, I don't want to even dream or think about it, then if they're thinking like that every day, just throughout the course of the day, then their spirit is, in a similar position when they sleep. So they're suppressing some things apparently. But for individuals like that, it's more so the direction would be towards engaging them or allowing them to engage themselves in some form of study or ritual practice consciously, whether it was something just as basic as susuhon, meditation, on a specific, if they learn about some culture and if they're interested in that, some basic susuhon, some basic meditation, or if they're not even interested in that yet, very often through information, through publications, through whether it's, books or videos or something that's educational, with some information they've never seen before that would, blow their mind, so to speak, like, wow, I didn't know our people were doing this. That kind of information, sometimes that's enough to unlock the door. And once they begin to study that, because just by virtue of the fact that somebody cracks open a book and starts staring at it, they're actually engaged in an oracular function there as well, because they're seeking to be informed. Beats out, they're asking, their co-beats are going to ask, and then the actual geometric forms of the letters, as well as the images and the images that are suggested by the letters and the images and the story and everything else is actually informing their spirit. So they're yearning to know something, they're asking for something, the yearning is an asking, and then they get a response. So they're engaged in the oracular function just by virtue of the fact that you give them a book that is a form of adebisa, a form of divination. Without them even realizing that, you're engaged in a divinatory relationship just by giving someone a book, especially about our ancestral culture. So as soon as they begin to zone in and focus on that and repel everything else that's going on around them so they can concentrate, they're engaged in susuho at that point, meditation, without even realizing they're just reading, but they're meditating. And then if it's information that will lead them towards, a proper knowledge of who we are, Afurakani people, and the value and worth of our ancestral religious practices, and that will lead them towards that kind of ritual practice as well.
Okay. I was just wondering about that since you were talking about the dream state.
Okay. So we appreciate it. Yini, I say that we appreciate the call.
Gracias.
Okay. And on the phone line number 2557, you had a question or a comment? And just make sure, scrolling through this piece right here, saw some information in the chat room. I just wanted to make sure we did not miss what we were looking at. Okay, and we're just scrolling through right quick. Okay, so give me one more second as we pull this up. And in the meantime, so while we're pulling this up, for the individuals who came on a little bit later, we had made an announcement the day before yesterday on the show talking about the event coming up that we were tentatively scheduling for November 14th, which is the Koko Ball event. So it's actually, we got confirmation for the 14th date was not a good date, but the 15th is open. So that's what we're working on, November 15th in Washington, D.C. It will be the Koko Ball. That's the name of our book dealing with dissexuality. Homosexuality was never accepted in ancient Kemet. So we will be having a presentation where we will be presenting on that publication. The Koko Ball movement is when we're not only having the free workshops and so forth, talking about that information, but also the other aspect of it, talking about eradicating dissexuality, homosexuality from Afurakani people, our community, through ancestral religion, through the practice of ancestral religion. Of course, our people can repel those negative discarnate spirits that give suggestions and push them towards members of the same sex against their will, and then they're walking around thinking, ever since I was a child, I was, feeling a pull or a push towards the same sex, and they were feeling a push, and it was artificial and it had nothing to do with them. It's always a superimposition upon our spirit. There's nothing innate or real about dissexuality. It's always perverse, from a perverse sort. And then when people suffer from child molestation and other forms of abuse, that simply exacerbates the problem. And then they really believe that, they were being pushed in this direction. And in reality, they never really, that's not who they are. So through the practice of ancestral religion, our people overcome that perversity, that sexual deviance, as well as other forms of perversity like, drug addiction and everything else. So the Koko Ball movement, the book Koko Ball, which we published, of course, going through those texts of ancient Kemet, translating them properly, proving that dissexuality, homosexuality never existed in ancient Kemet, was not accepted. But then we have the piece dealing with eradicating dissexuality, homosexuality through ancestral religion. The workshop is free. Part of our Koko Ball movement is us raising the funds so that we can give away, number one, a free copy of the softcover book to everyone who attends the event. That's what we do at all of our events. But also giving away copies to our people in the community free copies. We're working to print out over 100 of these in the next couple of weeks so that we can give away free copies. And when the people come, they can give away these free copies to our people wherever they are in the country. And, of course, in different parts of the world. The ebook version of the Cocoa Ball book is already a free download. Just like all of our 17 books are free downloads online, but then we also sell the softcover versions, which range between $8 and $11. When people get this book in their hands and they study this detailed information like the divine prohibition against bisexuality, homosexuality found in the Runu Pert and Heru, the so-called Book of the Dead, the Book of Coming Forth by Day and so forth, when you see that divine prohibition against bisexuality, you'll see that our people, when we're communicating with the divinities are showing us that this sexuality is insane. If you go against divine order and embrace that insanity, then you suffer physically, but you also suffer in the spirit realm after death as well. So when our people get a hold of this publication and can share it with one another and share it with friends and family and coworkers and so forth, we begin to reverse that perverse programming that the whites in our offspring are constantly blasting through television and radio, music, videos, the internet, Twitter, of course, and Facebook and everything else. Whites in our offspring are constantly trying to force this sexuality, homosexuality, this perversity on our people. And, of course, some Negroes go along with that because they're deviants themselves or they're out of their mind. So when people get this book that combats that nonsense and shuts it down in detail, when we get into detail with regard to the presentation dealing with the discarnate, deceased relatives and non-relatives who seek to influence negatively relatives and non-relatives, when you engage the ritual processes to eradicate and move these perverse spirits out of the way, then our people are able to overcome that sexual deviance right away. So this is what we're going to be dealing with, having that Cocoa Ball event November 15th. We'll be sending out the event notification for that later tonight. If you would like to assist us in this process of producing enough, actually these books in the next few weeks, 100 or more, any purchase of one or more of our books allows us to engage that process. And of course, it also allows us to engage, participate in purchase or, rent the venue space and so forth. Again, we do not charge an admission fee for any of our events. So any assistance is helpful. So if you were thinking about purchasing a book in the past, one or more of our books, and you've forgotten or you were just thinking about it recently, or you saw the new Hoodoo Mind, Hoodoo Nation Festival book, you can make a purchase on our NHOMA page, and that's, any purchase assists us in that process. So, of course, continue to publish our books and everything, but then we can set aside a small percentage of the funds that we receive from regular purchases, and over time we can collect that and then utilize that to print out free copies of books. So you can go to the NHOMA page on our website, the publications page. We'll put the link in the chat room, and then that way you can either make a donation, any donation of $15 or more. You have the option of receiving one or more of our books, and then, of course, just the regular book purchases. All of that assists us in doing what we need to do. We've had great success with free book giveaways. We've given over 500 of our books away over a year and a half period to the different cities we have gone in addition to the fact that the ebook versions are free, but people are able to come to our events for free, get a free copy of the book that we are speaking on, and once they leave, they can take that information and share with friends, family, coworkers, and so forth. In this way, this real information gets out and begins to impact the lives of our people in a positive capacity. Okay, so there's a question in the chat room. Is it possible for us to communicate with the kayats of other people, relatives, etc.? Yes, your kayat can communicate, which is a divinity, can and will communicate with the ka or kayat of, relatives and so forth, because the kayat is a divinity in and of itself, and will communicate with others because they are colleagues of the other ka, or kas, kau, and kaitu, or spirits, souls of our people. So yes, that takes place. But of course, the communication only takes place with the permission of that divinity, in harmony with that divinity. Not just, forcing anything, but always under the permission of the Krawa. Just like the Abosom doing work for someone, they only do that with the permission of the person's Kra, because the person's Kra is a divinity in and of itself, is a colleague of the other divinities, the forces in nature, the Abosom, Orisha, Vodu, and so forth. So, as colleagues, they will communicate. But if you're seeking to align with that, of course, the Ka of another person will not allow you to communicate unless it's something based on divine order. So that's our answer for that. And let us know if that clears that up. All right, so we want to make sure we didn't miss anything else. It is about only 15 minutes left in the broadcast. So we're going to put a link. Oh, there was one other piece. Hold on one second. Okay. Now, we were talking about, and the reason we put the UBEN-HYENG in this particular piece on the broadcast, the promotional piece for the broadcast, there's a section in the UBEN-HYENG that, of course, pulls all of that information together and simply verifies that. So we can go through that quickly. We've gone through this one before when we did the whole, explication of the UBEN-HYENG, one of our publications. This particular piece, the human body, the world, are shrines within a shrine. So we talk about during the dream experience or the trance experience. The images perceived are through a third eye while the two eyes are closed. The experience of radiant energy in the area between the eyebrows when a revelation, intuition, or vision comes to you reveals this third eye center to be a center of inner vision. It is a shrine, a focal point for some aspect of consciousness to show itself. When air vibrates through a musical instrument, the vibration produces a sound. When air and spirit vibrate through the human instrument, sounds are produced. Yet if your human instrument has a different configuration than every other human instrument, then the collection of sounds resonating from you are unique. Spirit vibrates perpetually through your vehicle, perpetually producing the same collection of sound vibrations. One comes to understand that these vibrations, unique to your person, make up your true name. They represent the specific configuration of forces which govern your incarnation, your moment of entry into the physical plane. If heard with a spiritual ear, they may be reproduced by the vocal cords. It is from the throat center that these sounds or words of power can be generated. This center is a focal point for that aspect of consciousness. It is a shrine. So we've already talked about in this piece the dream experience, the trance experience, receiving information through the dream or trance experience, and of course, it's radiant. If it happens, you have that inner vision through the third eye area, then that is the focal point for some aspect of consciousness to show itself. That's a shrine. Then we talked about replicating the sound vibrations that are generated as spirit moves through your physical vehicle. Your physical vehicle doesn't look like anyone else's unless you have an identical twin. So that physical structure, life force energy is moving through that unique structure. It generates a unique configuration of sound vibrations unique unto you. When you can hear them with the spiritual ear, then you can replicate them, and that is the enunciation of your actual name. You have a name right now, just by virtue of the fact that life force energy, your body is circulating through your specific physical vehicle and your spirit body, constantly emanating a specific configuration of sound vibrations, which is your true name. So then you replicate that with the vocal cord. So the dream experience, attuning inwardly, attuning to the energy moving throughout the body and replicating that with the vocal cords. Now we're talking about ritual incantation, ritual prayer, and so forth, even ritual song. We talked about Tehuti Mesu, having the dream experience, then communicating with the Abosom, the divinity, through the dream experience, and then he enunciates what needs to be done and engages a ritual process through so-called meditation to silence his heart but then moving forward to make those offerings that the divinity said to make so that he can align himself with order and his divine function. Okay, anxiety often makes for a heavy heart, for near it is the center through which the emotional energy is received and transmitted. Just as the heart receives and transmits life blood, it is the focal point for some communicative aspect of consciousness. It is also a shrine. Of course, in the text, Tehuti Mesu IV stills his heart so that he could be receptive. So here it says anxiety often makes for a heavy heart. Well, when you overcome that anxiety, and we talked about overcoming fear and doubt in the previous broadcast, then you don't have that heaviness in the heart. And when you don't have that heaviness in the heart, then just like the physical heart is a free flow of blood and therefore energy, in the spiritual sense, it's also a focal point for an aspect of consciousness. It is also a shrine in that heart region. When you overcome that anxiety, you still your heart so you can be focused. Then you can focus on the function you came into the world to execute. Nature is composed of shrines within shrines. Can you not communicate with nature? Is your mode of communication in a mountainous region different than it is when you immerse yourself in a body of water? Meditate on a hill or mountain. Meditate under the direct energy of the noonday sun. Meditate under the full moon. Meditate in the waters of the divinity, the goddess, the Abosom. Are these focal points connected yet different? They are shrines, various focal points for communication with various aspects of consciousness. And we just want to touch on that specific point because we were talking about the dream experience. We were talking about the replication of those sound vibrations with the vocal cords, which is really not only speech, but incantation, ritual song, ritual prayer, ritual incantation, and so forth. That's directly associated with this whole, and the notion of nature is shrines within shrines, and we go to shrines to communicate with the Abosom that take up a residence in those shrines of nature. This is all connected to Tehuti Mesu through the dream experience and engaging in ritual prayer, ritual incantation, invoking the Abosom. The Abosom speaks to the individual, shows what offerings need to be done and what clearing needs to be done, what ritual purificatory processes must be engaged in order to get in alignment with order, to recognize what direction you need to be going in. This text is not talking about like the Akwamu Stela, what went wrong and therefore how we were out of harmony with order and caused us to suffer. Then we need to find out what we need to do to restore order. That's the restoration of divine balance. But the incorporation of divine laws, the expansive pole of ancestral religion, even if you think everything is going fine, you still need to incorporate law to see if you're on track with your divine function. You're not suffering, but you notice something is missing. So then you move forward and find out you need to execute your function in a specific fashion. You're incorporating law in this regard. So, okay. So it looks like we have just a couple of minutes left in the broadcast. We have a couple of more phone calls on the line. If you want to listen beyond 11:30, and we have about 10 minutes left, but if you want to listen beyond 11:30 and you're just listening as far as on the computer, then you would need to get on the phone line before 11:30 because at 11:30 it cuts off online, but the people on the phone can still hear. The phone number is 657-383-0635, 657-383-0635. We have about 9 minutes to call in. So we're going to go back to the phone line. Ichiawo, greetings on the phone line, number 3436. You had a question or a comment?
Yes, peace.
Peace.
Yeah, I got on a little late, and I heard some of the things you were saying about the dream experience and everything. And again, I like what you're saying because again, it's in tune with everything that we're about. Is that again, you're speaking, and we can take things as mental, spiritual, and physical from that aspect of what you're saying. And you're 100% correct on what you were saying about the dream and everything, because we know that for everything that has a a conscious part, it also has a subconscious part also. So again, those of us with melanin and the melanated people, we are so in tune with the universe and the planet that it makes 100% sense that we are so in tune with it that you go and you meditate. Again, that triggers that pineal gland and all of that, so that, again, we're so connected with the universe, because in the universe and then within ourselves is every element in the universe. And again, I've also traveled in different forms, the schools of thoughts through Masonry and other things in spiritual aspects. So, brothers, you all keep doing and putting that information out there, because we need it. Again, there's also, again, like I say, you can have a mental, a spiritual, and a physical revolution, but the true revolution starts within ourselves and in our minds, everything. So, again, I say Ashe, Hotep, Salam, and Shalom.
We appreciate that, and we appreciate that comment. Absolutely. Talking about melanin content, very important. We have a few articles dealing with Abatum, with melanin.
Mm-hmm.
It's very important with regard to the Ka and Kaet, the divinities Ka and Kaet, or sometimes they're written Kaka, Kakaet, or Keku and Kekuet.
Right.
The black substance of space, the male and female divinities that animate that black plasma. That black substance, a portion of that exists within us, which is our quote-unquote melanin, or Abatum, as we say.
Right.
So, and everything in the universe is contained within those two divinities. They regulate everything. They have jurisdiction over everything. So just like planets, sun, moon, stars, and everything is floating in that black substance, just like our organs are bathed by that melanin and are floating in that black substance within our bodies. So we have a direct connection to everything. It has electromagnetic properties, as you said. It photosynthesizes sunlight just like chlorophyll does, and it also transforms sound waves into food and energy for our body cells. So it allows us on a physiological level to align with every naturally occurring entity in creation. Now, the unnatural things we're not in alignment with, and we should not be. But we appreciate that call. All right. And, okay. So I think that was hold on one second. Okay, there's another call on the phone line. Okay, Michelle on the phone line, number 8581. You had a question or a comment?
Yes, I had a question, Michelle.
Michelle, what's up?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Speaker. I want to know, with all the deaths in the pineal gland and the energies that we harvest with our melanin, in what depths do we use these energies when it comes to transitioning, and in those moments of, and those things that we are taught now to be so afraid of, you know what I mean, like death and all those things. And the reason why I asked this question is because I've kind of researched a few of our ancestors and ancestresses and the horrors of deaths that they and the bouts that they went through that we take so for granted today. For instance, there was a Wilson Chinham, who had to wear this slave collar, and when it would break your neck just with a branch touching it. But it's still so much valor in his eyes and so much strength. And with this pineal gland and when you transition the death, is that, could you elaborate and just give us, that depth of what it means, our melanin, you know what I mean?
Okay.
When I look in his eyes, I see a brave, intelligent, and he has his collar on, and he's standing there, with so much tenacity, it's overwhelming.
I understand. I do know. I think I just recently saw that image once again. Somebody had posted it on Facebook. Yeah. So number one, with regard to death and the transition piece, and then you talked about the fearlessness. Number one, the whole notion of people teaching us to be fearful of death and all that kind of stuff. Of course, the Whites and Arab Springs want us to be fearful of that, but you overcome that immediately and forever when you engage ancestral communication and you know exactly what's awaiting you on the other side because you're engaged in communication with our people on the other side on a regular basis. So that cuts into and eradicates all that quote-unquote fear of the unknown. So that's one thing. Our people weren't fearing death. They knew that once, even with the Adae state, as we talked about from the beginning, the sleep state is a gateway to the ancestral realm. So you communicate with your NSAMANKOM through the sleep state. You know that when you make your transition, especially when you're living in harmony with order, that you are going to be with your spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors. So there's no fear. There's no fear of, a fictional little devil walking around sticking people and all burning in hell and all of that. When you know what's really going on. So the fear is gone. And then there's another piece regarding that. Our people, sometimes people say, well, why didn't they just commit suicide during enslavement and things like that? And you have a handful of people who did that. But coming from a culture rooted in divine order, part of that fearlessness also has to do with our divine function. We're not wired to get rid of ourselves and kill ourselves. It's over, anxiety. We have a divine function to execute, and we're drawn in direction to fulfill that function. And it's never drawing us in the direction to just end it all because we're suffering. We don't fear death, so we're not concerned about death because we know what's going to happen after that. So since we don't fear that, we can do whatever we need to do right in the physical realm, and we're seeking to take the fight to the criminal. We're looking for any, opening to even the score. So we're not seeking to take ourselves out and let them off the hook. We're going to survive. We're going to thrive. We're going to move forward. We're going to maintain our sense of strength and power for our own selves, for our own family, for our posterity and so forth. And that's why some of us are very strong now, because some of those people who were strong then. But we're going to figure out a way to maintain unless we get killed. And if we get killed, of course, we don't fear that because we're going to be with our NSAMANKOM anyway. But if we do not get killed, we are going to kill until we get killed. And we're going to even the score. We're going to restore balance. So we have that natural draw towards that. We don't have a natural draw to take ourselves out. It's not written into your cry to end your life. It's written into your cry to execute a specific function. So this is what we're dealing with. And so that's, that's where, when you see that kind of strength, that She, War, and She, they try to burn you, but you do not burn. As the Adinkra symbol, She, War, and She, teaches us and conveys to us through that ancestral wisdom. We are unburnable, indestructible people. As Afurakani people, we understand that to be our nature. Our spirits are She, War, and She. They are unburnable. So because of that, then we have the capacity to confront any obstacle that's presented to us and overcome it, and overcome any enemy that confronts us. So that's wired within us.
That's right. Okay. Madase, thank you very much.
Okay. Yeni Asera, and we appreciate the call. Okay. So actually, it is now 11:30. So we're going to end it here. We just wanted to make sure that people got the information with regard to the, okay, hold on 1 second. Okay, it was back on. All right, so keep checking in fact, I'm going to put the link to the Cocoa Ball page. If you go to the website, odwirafo.com/Cocobo, KOKOBO.html, you will get to the Cocoa Ball page. Keep checking that page. We'll be putting the information regarding the event coming up in Washington, D.C. on November 15th. It's going to be from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m., free presentation, and we will be giving away free copies of the Cocoa Ball book. We may have another presenter there as well, myself and possibly another presenter. So we'll be putting that information out. So keep checking the Cocoa Ball page on the website, as well as we have a Cocoa Ball page on Facebook, a page specifically dedicated to that. And again, Yerase for those who have purchased some books to assist us with the cost of renting the venue. And we're still engaged in that process. So if you would like to support that effort, as well as the effort of printing out the, of course, full color versions of the books, we're going to print out at least 100 to give away, but also not only give away to the people who come, but we would also like to have some for those people to be able to take with them and give away themselves. So they keep one for themselves, but when they go out to the community, they're giving away literature that's proving that there's a divine prohibition against this sexuality in our ancestral culture and just in our culture in general, as well as dealing with this notion of overcoming this sexual deviance and the perverse urges that are imposed upon our people from disembodied spiritual agencies. Of course, within our culture, we have the capacity to overcome all of that nonsense and restore order to our people and our community and eradicate this sexuality, homosexuality from our community. So, through ancestral religion. So, Cocoa Ball is not only the name of the book, Cocoa Ball is the movement. And this is the first workshop specifically communally that we're having on that, and these will continue in different parts of the country. This is the first one in Washington, D.C. If you want some more information, of course, you can contact us. We will be updating the site on a regular basis, so keep checking that out. So, Yerase, we thank you for tuning in, and Yebeshia Bio, we will meet again. What's up?